We are walking in the light of God. We are walking in the light of God.
Welcome to this episode number 10 in a series entitled Traveling with Pilgrims of Hope. I am Father Ron Will, coming to you from Precious Blood Renewal Center in Liberty, Missouri. Pope Francis declared the year 2025 as a Jubilee Year with the theme, The Year of Hope. This series, Traveling with Pilgrims of Hope, introduces us to individuals who have experienced hope and who are striving to share hope with others. Too often in our world, it's easier to give in to despair than to rely on hope. But as the Apostle Paul says, if God is for us, and God is, who can be against us? Pope Francis said, I cannot give you hope, but I can tell you that hope is where Jesus is, and Jesus is everywhere. When our own hope is dim, perhaps there are loved ones, Facebook friends, co-workers, or the server who fills our coffee cup, who models hope and quiet joy. There are people working for justice and peace and a livable planet for coming generations who are trying to make people's lives better in the face of overwhelming odds. If they can carry on in hope, might we not try to imitate them and their confidence that God's presence is alive and well in our world? I recently was at a presentation at Precious Blood Renewal Center given by Heidi Moore, the executive director of Missourians to Abolish the Death Penalty. It is a challenging task to work for the abolishment of the death penalty, and I believe that it takes a lot of hope to keep working at it. Today, I have invited Heidi to have a conversation with us about her experiences of bringing hope to people on death row. Thank you, Heidi, for taking some time to join us and visit with us about your ministry. And I'd like you just to begin by giving us an overview of the ministry that you have been doing and how you got started in it, and why do you keep doing it?
Thank you, Father. So I've been in this position almost 4 months as executive director of Missourians to Abolish the Death Penalty. Previously, though, I was the probation and parole officer at a prison where the men who live under a death sentence were housed. And a lot of people felt like they were hopeless in that situation. Some of them were facing 1,000 years.
Wow.
Seriously, 1,000 years versus life without parole, or a death sentence. And so I left there and did prisoner reentry with the Catholic nonprofit group in St. Louis. And even as a state employee, though, I considered it a service to others. I considered the ability to be fair, to be consistent with people, and to recognize that no one wants to be judged on the worst action they made in their life. Not forever. That's not my job to do. I'm Christian, I'm Catholic. That belongs to a person much more schooled in that than I am. My job is just to interact with these people and to remind them of the humanity that all of us were born with.
So reminding people of the humanity, even of death, somebody who's done some terrible crime. That's probably a challenge because there's probably some people out there who say, no, they deserve some severe punishment.
There are people out there who say that. However, I have to remember not everyone is Christian, and not everyone who opposes or supports capital punishment answers to a religious authority higher than themselves. But for those that are Christian, I became Catholic as an adult, baptized and confirmed in 2012, and learning the teachings, and some of the teachings I'm still learning, but we're called to walk this path. And we are not to judge. We are to treat everyone as our brother and sister, and to treat everyone as a fellow human, and to do the best that we can each day. Some days I'm better at it than others. And I think that it's hard to remind people who don't have a faith about that, but it's not that hard to remind them that in kindergarten and first grade, no kid said they wanted to be a murderer or a child abuser or a drug addict or spend their life in and out of prison. Everyone had hope, even at that young of an age, being raised in some of the horrible family lives that we know many people have lived in. And they want to be firemen or policemen or teachers or truck drivers. They have something that they want to be. And when you're talking to people who aren't as sympathetic to those who have harmed others, sometimes that person needs to be reminded of what it was like to be a child and to have hope. And that just because their life is where it is now does not mean that there's other people who were given the same opportunities or chances as we were.
I read something, just a couple headlines from this morning about the state of Missouri. The Attorney General, Andrew, what's his name?
Bailey left.
Andrew Bailey. He there was somebody on death row and then the judge reversed it because they said, no, this person is really innocent. And now the Attorney General has come back and said, no, this person deserves the death penalty. Those kind of situations must be very frustrating for you. How do you respond to that?
You don't. I mean,
Okay.
I think there's some situations where private prayer, asking others for prayer, since I'm in a faith space right now where I can talk about that, reminding myself that not everything has to be said. Not everything has to be said right then, and not everything has to be said by me. And when I'm dealing with victims who I as a survivor of childhood sexual abuse and assault, but that's different than having a family member harmed by someone in a death penalty case. I I have a place for victims that they have a right to feel how they write, and it's not up to me to infringe on that. There's a lot of victims who oppose the death penalty. But when you're dealing with someone like Andrew Bailey, who there is nothing to indicate that he was acting out of good faith with any of our cases. I mean, he opposed people's releases even when the prosecutor said they were innocent and when they were likely innocent. I mean, we saw Khalifa Marcellus Williams executed under him, who was likely an innocent case. And there really is nothing I can say to that man that would benefit the movement, because he appears to be in his lane, and for whatever reason, whether it's for political accolades, whether it's for tweets and retweets, I'm not exactly sure, but we have this streak of meanness running through politics and society as well, but I'm seeing it in politics now in a way that I didn't used to see it. And for me in my position, I think I'm better not replying and going internally and reminding myself that sometimes people need me to pray for them, but also I need to pray so I don't say something for someone who just makes these absurd comments about people's lives as if he's in a glass house.
Well, that makes sense to me that you don't respond, or but you somehow internalize it and pray for the person. But in my own case, it's hard not to get angry. How do you deal with anger?
Yeah, I get angry sometimes. I I started working out in the past year, which has helped some. I journal, I pray, and I've recently and I meditate. Are the big ways for me. I recently started putting together some jigsaw puzzles again, um, to have something abstract, something concrete that I'm doing to put any of that energy. What I have to remind myself, anger is energy that serves no one. And if I'm staying in a place of anger, then I'm not able to help any of the guys under a death sentence. I'm not able to explain to anyone rationally why this is bad public policy. And in the end, it doesn't matter. People come to abolishing the death penalty as a decision, whether it's through religious reasons, um, their own evolution, they've had family members, or just fiscally it doesn't make sense. There's a lot of reasons to come to this issue, and I'm fortunate there because I can lean into some of the other issues. But I get mad. I mean, the day Governor Kehoe came out and rejected the clemency the morning after I had been with you all the evening before, I was on fire. I was so crushed, and obviously not for me. I'm here talking to you today. I was disappointed that someone went so blatantly against the teachings of the church. I was so disappointed because there's hope in this man because he wasn't the previous administration. And think I was in front of TV crews when I got the news. And I took the microphone and I didn't swear too much. And then we walked a few miles that day. And what I had to do when I get angry, and I've had some good people remind me of this while I've been in the position, and it goes back to similar to Andrew Bailey, but Governor Kehoe. Say anything that will harm the future of the movement or the other men that we are now going to have to ask the same governor to consider. And if I just come out like just as upset and filled with fury as I was, I have the potential with a sharp tongue and quick wit to isolate people that I will need. It's bigger than me. And I think before we move on, the anger, again, as an adult, when I learned about the Blessed Mother at the foot of the cross when Jesus was getting executed, and the strength and hope that she continued to display as she sat there with him, as she walked, knowing what was occurring. And that is a place that when I have been in struggles, and I've had many in life, that I found hope and faith and comfort through her. I'm not a mom, but I cannot imagine what that feeling would be like. And she was able to hold her tongue, to maintain her composure, to turn inward to our Father in the midst of her son being murdered just because. And so I'm not comparing myself to the Blessed Mother, but the faith and the strength that she showed is what sometimes I have to try to remind myself that she could do it. So I know that I'm strong enough to do it somewhere.
Those are good. You've got a couple practices there. I just like to repeat. I think it would be good for our listeners just to remind some, because I'm sure some of our listeners also carry anger when people continue to be put to death, especially unjustly when there's evidence that this person really is innocent. But you use journaling, you use prayer, you use meditation. I just think those are good reminders for some of our listeners when they find themselves in similar situations. But let's look at this from another angle. Part of what this year of hope, this Jubilee year, is the Pope is reminding us of, that we are striving to bring hope to others. Can you think of an example or more of where you know that you brought hope, you gave hope to someone?
Yes, I've been blessed enough that the men that I worked with when I was doing both probation, parole, and prisoner reentry were long-term men who had been in prison decades, and so they often stayed in touch. Um, and we gave them hope. Those of us, Sister Carlene and the other groups that volunteered often said, "We don't do this because you're Catholic. We do it because we're Catholic." But we provided hope, giving a man a release date when he never thought he was going to be released from prison is giving him hope, giving them a place to live. When someone's been in prison 40 plus years, 30 plus years, and you're putting them in their own studio apartment and teaching them how to live 24/7,
Mm,
and they'll call at 3 a.m. just to see if you're serious about answering and ask if they can go outside and smoke.
mm,
And they know that they have this safety net, and watching that hope, that they realize this isn't a trick, that you're not asking them for anything except for do the right thing in life, has just been beautiful to experience. And there's been so many men who have been successful in the programs I've been around because of the wonderful staff, and they wanted it. And when at times when I'm feeling hopeless, or when I'm feeling dealing with people who don't have that level of hope, I remember the people that whose eyes lit up. And there was a man who, he didn't get a death sentence because we weren't giving the death penalty during those years when he was sent to prison for killing two people at 16. But his eyes, he would get lost in the grocery store because so much had changed in 43
mm.
years.
Oh, yeah.
He and it's almost like watching a little kid in a Disney store, watching him in Walgreens. And those types of moments when you recognize that the whole world is opening up for people who, again, made some very horrible mistakes, but they're not that same person. And going to the movie theater or a baseball game with someone who had been locked up that long and experiencing that true joy that they never thought they would experience before is
Mm.
enough to fill up my cup of hope, and then hopefully have enough, um, because there's ups and downs in life and frustrations, but there have been some amazing people who recognize not everyone gets this chance, and if I take it, I need to do right by it. And they're doing wonderful things, and that makes me smile.
Yeah. It's great feeling, I'm sure, inside to see the positive effect on people's faces, the joy or the hope about their future, and to know that you've been an instrument in helping to bring that hope to them.
Yes, yes.
So I'm sure that gives you energy to keep doing it again and again. You also have this group, you're executive director of Missourians to Abolish the Death Penalty. So working with that group, maybe you can say a little bit about how are you interacting, and how is, as a group, are they helping to bring hope?
Well, some of the men just want to know that people care and are fighting for them. But it's
Mm,
not just the men. What I found interesting, especially with this last campaign, and I won't go into detail because I don't know how much I can, but there's large legal teams and large people that work in this system that
mm.
we have. And when people who are government employees reached out and said, "Thank you for saying that, we're not allowed to,"
Ah,
that gave me hope I wasn't even realizing existed. That as this executive director, I can say what I feel needs to be said for our organization, for the clemency campaign, for the people waiting to be executed. And I wasn't thinking about some of those whose words are limited based upon their jobs and roles, even if they're advocating for the same people. And so that gave me some unexpected hope this last time, was being able to speak out and realize that there's that group that leans on us to say some of the things that need to be said. Like, if you're a pro-life governor, how do you justify this execution? Um, and and so that's one way, but also people around the state. We have a wonderful state, and we have people who oppose the death penalty, or we have people who hadn't thought about it. We have a large group that still do not know that we have the death penalty, even though we're third in the country. And it's
Mm.
like that aha moment in a classroom, or maybe when you're dealing with others, but I would see it in a classroom sometimes with a student where the light bulb would come on. And when you're engaging people who haven't thought about the death penalty before, and you see a light click, even if they're not there, that gives me hope, because that's someone who's thinking about it now who wasn't before. So I,
Right.
I will try to find that hope wherever I can,
Mhm.
because it's not always easy. But I also have been told that I'm some of the hope that people are looking for. Um, as I get up and speak to people who are frustrated after governors time and time and time again are not listening, and
Mm.
reminding them we have bipartisan support. We just can't give up. Um, we have Republicans and Democrats that support the legislation, and finding again that sliver of hope of people to give them reason to keep fighting for this cause, because these men and women can't get out here and fight like they want to. They're in
Mhm.
prison, they're in county jail, awaiting to be sentenced, awaiting for a jury to come back and say life without or death, or a judge to sentence them to die.
You said something a couple minutes ago that reminded me of something that our Pope, Pope Leo, just said recently, that how did he put that? You cannot I, I lost it. You cannot be against abortion and for capital punishment and be pro-life. That's a good reminder for us who really believe we should be pro-life and want to be, but it's on both ends and everything in between that pro-life includes how we treat. You said at the very beginning of our discussion about you challenge all of us to look at every individual as a human, someone with dignity. Maybe you can say a little more about that. How do gospel values filter into your work? How do teachings of Jesus that you've picked up filter into your effort to abolish the death penalty?
We'll say that I was not, it's so weird. I wasn't raised in church. I was raised where I was scared to be seen praying at night so I wouldn't get in trouble. But
Mm.
my dad was a good man. My dad had a business and he would hire men from the halfway house, and Heidi, everyone deserves a second chance. Um, and I don't know where that came from with him, but I watched my parents give people a second chance. And as I then became an adult and started working and then seeing, oh, these values come from a teaching of a man called Jesus and Christianity, um, and 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 those types of things, um, I think it can be easy to forget. I have met people who are evil. I have met serial killers and serial rapists who I sleep better when they are not on the streets with us. That's a fact. I've
Mhm.
uh, that doesn't mean that we should murder them as a state, and that doesn't mean they should be in inhumane conditions. And I think this whole people want revenge so bad, and they don't want to abide by the Old Testament about anything else except for an eye for an eye. And they don't want to take it and learn what the true meaning, or what I've been taught the meaning of that is. And they just want to be angry, and they just want to punish. And we have to start somewhere. of reminding each other that things are not quite as personally as we think they are. When someone cuts me off in traffic, they didn't wake up that morning to cut Heidi Moore off in traffic. People are so self-absorbed. And I remember not too long ago, well, now it was probably longer, but a guy at a gas station asked for some money. I'm in St. Louis City. I gave him what I had. There was a cute few bucks. And the lady at the gas tank by me filling up says, "You shouldn't have done that." And I looked at her and I said, "Me giving him money is between me and my God, and what he does with it's between him and his." And
Good
and
response.
that's people want to automatically not give our neighbors and our friends the benefit of the doubt. They don't want to think that people can have changed. And again, these little kids, like they even some of the, and I will say worst of the worst, and there'll be someone not like that, but I can give them names. I doubt in first grade they said, "Well, I want to go across the country shooting people and racking up death sentences in a few states. I think that's what I want to do when I grow up." Something has happened,
Mm.
and we just have to tap into that. That may not have answered your question, and I used a lot of words, but just kind of made me think about it. I just had to kind of find it myself. And once I watched other people were behaving in ways I thought we should behave. And then those other people were largely Catholics doing the work of society and doing the work of Jesus and others that the government wasn't doing.
You said something has happened in that individual who did this terrible thing, which is another way of saying the person is not evil, but they did an evil action. So because the person is a child of God, I still need to treat that person with some kind of dignity, respect. We got some examples in the gospel of Jesus doing that to people in his society. And so we're supposed to follow his example. Now, let me ask also, we've got people listening to this podcast across state boundaries. What suggestions do you have for our listeners? What's one thing our listeners could do to get involved in their local area in efforts to minister to people facing the death penalty?
Well, one, know if your state has capital punishment or not. If you don't know, go to Death Penalty Information Center. It's a nonpartisan, just a group that provides information and research on the use of capital punishment. So it's a safe place for any listener to go to find out if they have the death penalty or not. Missouri has it. We're ranked third. If you don't have it, get involved in a state that does. You by get involved, get newsletters. You can still sign petitions. You can donate. You can write. There's organizations across the country that have some of the men and women under a death sentence need a pen pal, or they want to write to someone. There's safe ways to do it. Again, if we're talking to a novice listener, you're not giving a death row person your home address. Like that is not what anyone is asking. There are safe ways to do this. Some people give fictitious names. But people want a connection. There's also always prayer, money, donations, showing up at any events if you see them. If you were signed up for your national or your local, your state chapter, seeing if they have events and showing up and listening and supporting. And I also think one thing that in this social media phase that we've entered into society, when I was growing up, and more so probably you, Father, you didn't talk politics and religion outside of like the home or outside of places. And with social media, politics, like politics is an open book for most people that we spent years intentionally keeping it closed.
Mm.
But with that comes responsibility. And with that comes not assuming that you can't have an intelligent conversation with someone that you believe differently, but yet is not abrasive, is not in their face, is not telling them what to believe. And the death penalty really is a place that we could go with people and start having some conversations. And if you live in a state that doesn't have the death penalty, you might be in a better place to have some of those conversations with friends in other states than I am. If you're in New Jersey, which doesn't have the death penalty, and you have friends in Tennessee, you might have a conversation about it with them that normally you wouldn't. Sometimes we have to get outside our comfort zones, but if we're doing it when we're aligned for the true purpose, like God, make sure that I act with humility, that I'm humble, and I'm keeping your plan in front of me, not my plan. Because Heidi can get in her own way and ruin things. And I think that if we're looking at it from that aspect and trying to have a conversation for the real reasons of seeing where people stand, having dialogues to reach abolition, and not trying to one up someone or I told you so or best them in any way, that is another way that people can help us that are in other states that especially if they don't have the death penalty, start helping have some of those conversations and dialogues and get facts out there.
Something that strikes me is I can do this. I can write letters personally. I can pray personally, but being part of a group effort probably gives me energy to keep at it, to keep working. And you're part of this Missourians. It's not just you, Heidi Moore. It's the Missourians for the abolition of the death penalty. And so you get together with like-minded people and encourage one another when you're disappointed at something that happened. And so I'm sure a lot of our listeners out there too, maybe looking for like-minded people with whom you can share and pray and talk about how could we bring hope to somebody ourselves. So I'm going to kind of draw this to a close now. And just again, in the context of Pope Francis declaring this year as a Jubilee year, as the year of hope, and reminding ourselves of some of the things that he said, when things are going well, it's easy to believe in hope. But when situations are beyond our power to control or affect, our human tendency is to throw up our hands and retreat. On the contrary, Pope Francis clearly stated, when we place our hope in Jesus, he will not leave us abandoned. Keeping our focus on the fact that we are never abandoned by Jesus is a way to keep forging ahead. Even in the midst of trials, we can rely on God's goodness and attention. The smallest actions done in hope and trust make a difference. Hope is the key. Thank you, Heidi, for taking time to visit with us today. Thank you for being a pilgrim of hope in some very challenging situations and being an example and encourager for the rest of us. And those of you who are listening today, I invite you to join me again next month for this continuing series as we travel with another Pilgrim of Hope.
We are walking, walking, we are walking, walking, we are walking in the light of God. We are walking, walking, we are walking, walking, we are walking.